Good evening. My name is Amy Bach, and I am the co-founder and executive director of the nonprofit organization called United Policyholders. So welcome to our Roadmap to Recovery workshop. I think this is number 6 here in Sonoma. This is going to be, I believe, the last one we'll be having at this location, and we're going to be moving over to the high school. Starting next week, we have, we'll be having a workshop on the 25th. I'm going to have a slide about that. But for tonight, we're here. And like I said, if you're having trouble seeing it all, please feel free to cozy up down front, but whatever suits you is fine. How many of you have been to one of these workshops before, with a show of hands? Thank you. How many of you found out about tonight got an email from our organization? Okay. How many of you found out about it from the Facebook page for Standing Homes? Okay. How many of you heard about it just from a friend or a neighbor, word of mouth? Okay. I'm going to ask the audience if there is any other means of communication that you are getting information from. If you can let us know. Maybe Nextdoor, is folks using Nextdoor? Okay. So anything else, feel free to shout it out.
The city website.
The city website, okay. Anything else? Great. So obviously our intention is to reach as many people as possible with the information. So we do have a special guest tonight. We actually have 2. We have Carrie Olivier, who will be coming up in a few minutes. And then we also have Battalion Chief Matt Dahl, who will just be here to answer some questions a little later. We're going to be talking tonight about navigating the insurance claim process to restore your home to pre-wildfire condition as much as possible. And very briefly about our organization, we are not-for-profit, not for sale, we say, meaning we're not funded by the insurance industry or any other industry. We are a good old-fashioned nonprofit charity. We get our tax-exempt status because we are in the business of education. So we go around the country to areas where there have been disasters, and we provide information and support. We partner with government agencies and other nonprofits. So because we've been, I think, having some very good exchanges of information and bringing people together here, the city of Santa Rosa has asked to partner with us. We are thrilled to do that. Also the county, also FEMA. So as we go through tonight, and then if you make it to next Thursday's event and any future events, and if you want to email us, we do have communication with our partners. And if you're having trouble getting information, again, our objective is to get you the information that we think will help you reach your objective, which in the case of tonight's audience would be making the repairs and whatever else needs to be done to your home and in the surrounding area so that you feel comfortable and safe moving back in or living there, and so that your property value is maintained by having a home in good condition. We do have a library on our website, uphelp.org, and it's, of course, free, open 24/7, and we do our best to organize it to make it easy to navigate. We do have a fair amount of resources for people who have had what we have called a partial loss. I know some folks are referring to it as standing home owners. Whatever wording works for you works for us. But we do encourage you to go to our website early and often. We're a trusted information resource, and we are funded by donations and grants. We also do advocacy. And the Roadmap to Recovery is the program through which I'm here and you're here. And some of you, how many of you stopped at our table at the Local Assistance Center when it was open? Okay. So you know that that was staffed mostly by volunteers. We did have our staff attorney there, but mostly it was the people that were sitting at that table are people who themselves had a loss and have paid for the help they got from our organization by volunteering to help other people who are now walking in the same shoes they walked in. One of those people is a gentleman named Fred Booker, who's out there at the sign-in table. And Fred lost his home in the 1991 Oakland-Berkeley firestorm. And his community has stayed quite active in fire prevention, preparedness, and then, of course, recovery support. So thank you, Fred, out there, even though you can't hear me. Thank you to our partners, we already acknowledged, the city, the county, and the Department of Insurance. This workshop is intended to be general guidance, although I am a lawyer. I'm not here to give you legal advice, and we don't endorse or warrant any of the sponsors listed on our website. Our speakers volunteer their time as educators. Okay, scoping damage from smoke, ash, and extreme heat, and estimating restoration costs. I will say this, a partial loss in a wildfire like this can sometimes be, believe it or not, more challenging than a total loss for some people. And that is because when a house is gone, there's no dispute, it's gone. When a house is still standing, there can be disputes over what actually needs to be done to put it back. That's our primary focus tonight. And also, typically adjusters will, the more senior adjusters will be assigned to the total losses, so you may be having more junior adjusters, or you may not get as much quick responses to your emails and that sort of communication. Again, it's not that you're a lower priority, but obviously the total loss claims are typically going to be handled in special units, and your claims may not be getting as much attention, which just means you have to be a little more proactive. And that's obviously there's some emotional complications around the fact that you're the lucky ones. But the bottom line is you have just as much rights as a total loss survivor to get your full insurance benefits and get your house and your assets restored. Okay, so what's involved in restoring your home as close as possible to its pre-loss condition? So making sure your home's been inspected and tested, remediated, which is, you probably already know this fancy word for fixed. Cleaned, repaired, replaced. Of course, you want the cost to be covered by insurance. You want your indoor air quality to be restored. You want your home and your contents to be restored as well. Thorough inspections, proper cleaning methods are your objective. Easier said than done in many situations. Qualified inspectors, who are they? Where are they? How do I find them? What should I pay? Qualified testers, who does that sort of thing? There are people who do that sort of thing. We're going to be talking about that. Reputable lab results, well-documented reports, appropriate remediation techniques, air quality and soft goods testing, cleaning versus replacing. These are some of the hot spots on partial loss claims. I already talked about the fact, if you've come to some of our previous workshops, you know that a lot of the adjusters that are assigned to these claims here have more claims assigned to them than they really should have. A lot of them are overworked. Some of them are not trained as well as they should be, and sometimes they will shoot from the hip and say things about your home that may not be 100% right. And then, as I said already, total losses can be a higher priority for some, and then this is a really important one. You don't find what you don't want to find. That is one of the challenging parts of trying to navigate a fair insurance settlement and get everything done properly after a wildfire, because some of the damage is, you have to know what you're looking for to find it, because we're talking about extreme heat, very, very extreme heat. We're talking about some, obviously, ash, things that you can see, soot and ash, smoke, but then you're also sometimes talking about very small particulates that you can't see that cause the smell. Okay, obviously cost considerations drive decisions on hiring experts, paying for remediation. So, you know, when reporters ask me, you know, well, what's the deal with partial losses compared to total, I'll say, well, you know, there's this spectrum. You know, you'll hear about the adjuster saying, you know, here's a bottle, why don't you, you know, here's some money, get yourself some bleach and a sponge and have at it. And that's on the one side. And then on the far other side would be, you know, an expert that is, is going to bill you in the thousands of dollars to do thorough testing, give you a report. So there's this spectrum of costs that an insurance company faces when presented with a partial loss claim. And sometimes they need to be pushed from the bottle of bleach and the sponge closer to the spend the money on the qualified expert. And a lot of the time, people in your situation are trying to get their insurance company to pay for the proper inspection that the insurance company should pay for, but sometimes doesn't want to pay for because it's expensive. Okay, so we have a spectrum of repair methods in your situation. An industrial hygienist, if you haven't heard that terminology, that is a professional who specializes in indoor air quality. Materials structural engineers, restoration contractors, mold experts, these are some of the professional categories that you need to know about. What are some of the common disputes? Line of sight, what does that mean? Line of sight means that sometimes adjusters will only want to pay for the things that you can see. But obviously, or sometimes they'll say, well, we're just going to replace the carpeting in this room, but we're not going to replace the carpeting in that room. And then you say, well, then I'm going to have this patchwork looking situation that I didn't have before. And that's why it's not just line of sight that matters, okay? Like, kind, and quality, again, that's what I was talking about with the carpeting. You know, if you didn't have different colored carpeting in your rooms, you had it all one, well, then you're entitled to get it all one, even if it means tearing up carpeting that looks like it's still in good shape. But again, these are the fights that come up because, you know, the insurance company is a business and they're not interested in paying for things that they don't think they have to pay for, and you're very often have to be an advocate for yourself and for your asset and for restoring your asset. Okay, clean versus replace, that's the big ticket item when it comes to a partial loss. You know, Carrie's going to be talking to you about soft goods, which is a term you probably all are familiar with now. That would be anything that's got fabric on it, your drapes, your clothing, your furniture, your rugs. Can they be cleaned, or do they have to be ripped out and replaced? So everything that may be a challenge for you generally is going to come down to the cost considerations and then the appropriate method of restoring your asset. And like I said, paying, who's going to pay? Who's going to, are you going to hold out and try to wait until the insurance company agrees to pay? Or are you, if you're worried about the indoor air quality, or are you going to pony up the money and pay for the testing yourself, and then either try to get it back from the insurance company or eat it? Those are some of the decisions that you face. Okay. And then allegations of overreaching and pre-existing. So that's where the insurance company says, oh, come on. You know, we can tell that damage predates the fire and you're just trying to, profit from the fire. We've heard that argument, but hopefully you're not hearing that argument. And then, so an overreaching, saying, oh, come on, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. This isn't so bad, right? Again, that's pretty common. Okay. Hidden damage: water, mold, smoke, ash, particulates, air quality. These are the things you can't see. Is there damage inside of your ducts, your heating, your air conditioning? Is there damage behind the drywall? Drywall is porous. Does the drywall need to be ripped out and replaced? Or, as many adjusters will say, can you just slap another coat of paint on it and mask the smell? That's kind of that's the classic dispute. Underlayments and sheathing, subfloors, and this is a difficult dynamic. You as the homeowner have genuine concerns, about your health and about the health of your family and your visitors. And you want to make sure that down the line, people don't start having breathing problems, or if they have breathing problems already, obviously it's genuine concern. Each home and family is impacted differently, and as I said, the challenge is often, how do I find the expert and who's going to pay for that expert? How do insurers typically handle partial losses? Well, there's a spectrum, like I said. It's not uniform, but we do see patterns. Typically, we will see them downplaying the health concerns. There are cultivating friendly experts. That's where the insurance company has their stable of professionals that they know are not going, or if anything, are going to understate damage, or going to say what the insurance company wants them to say, that play ball with them. Not all insurers do that, but that's a typical dynamic. You have professionals that do insurance work day in and day out, and they know how to sometimes cut corners so that their bill comes in the way the insurance company wants it to come in. Again, this doesn't always happen, but it is reality. So often the expert that you're going to want, that you're going to be able to trust, is not going to be somebody who does a lot of business with insurance companies. Not always. Typically a good expert will go both ways. They'll do some work for insurers and some work for property owners. But typically, you're going to want somebody who does more work for property owners than insurers. Wildfire smoke damage litigation in other states, there's been a lot of it. It's kind of a big deal. How many of you have been solicited by law firms, related to, obviously related to the PG&E piece, but related to smoke damage? How many people? Okay, well, it has been a big deal because of the dynamic I was talking about. The insurers will say, oh my gosh, this just again, wipe down the walls and stop whining. They won't use that terminology, but that's kind of the dynamic. And then the homeowner will say, hey, this is serious. And there, as I said, there's been quite a bit of litigation around this in other states and in this state. Getting a thorough inspection and a complete report and estimate. What's included? What kind of report should I receive? Carrie will touch on that. What are examples of commonly missed, overlooked, inappropriately minimized, or overlooked damage? Again, Carrie will touch on that. Making your case that your insurer should pay, right? If you've been to our workshops before, you know that United Policyholders is about speaking up, having your paperwork organized, keeping a paper trail, and making your best case to your insurance company about why they should do what you feel they should do in connection with your claim, whether it be bringing an expert out or paying a bill that you've presented to them. We are here, and our website is here to give you the ammunition that you need to be your own best advocates. Now, that's not always possible. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but Being your own best advocate means you're making clear requests in writing to formally request additional inspections or funds to repair, clean, restore your home. We encourage you to go up the chain of command at the insurance company. We have sample letters on our website that you customize. You can use we just give you the wording to give you a suggestion for how best to present what you want to the insurance company in writing. And then again, very often you have to go above your adjuster, the one that's assigned, because typically the adjuster that's assigned to your claim is going to have, they all have a limit of dollar authority, how much money they're allowed to pay out without going to a supervisor or somebody several levels up. And it's much lower than you'd think. So again, very often in a situation with wildfire damage, you've got to go over your adjuster's head in order to get a resolution. Not always. And again, I'm here to say, like, we certainly hope that you have a good experience with your insurance company. So we're not here to say, oh, you're going to get cheated and you know, no matter what. That's not true at all. But we do know what the hot spots are, and we do know how often there are disputes in these areas that I'm discussing. Okay, and then backing up your requests with documentation of your damage and or explaining to the insurer that you feel that the expert that they may have sent in was biased and wasn't thorough and wasn't diligent in doing the inspection and really accounting for all the damage that needs to be repaired. And so one last thing before I turn the mic over to my great friend Carrie, who's traveled from Colorado to be with us tonight. Public adjusters, what would a person in your situation be interested in hiring a public adjuster, and why, and what would they do for you? And so what I want to say about that is that a public adjuster can be a great resource for people who are, first of all, if you are time challenged in any way, you know, navigating an insurance claim, partial or total, can be very time consuming. So if you don't have the time, you may want to turn things over to a professional, especially if you, at this point, 3 months out, are not where you think you should be on your claim. So time challenged is one. Another is if you have hit a wall where you feel uncomfortable or dissatisfied with the way your insurer is handling your claim, public adjuster is a great option there because they are professionals who day in and day out read insurance policies, and their shtick is to be able to go toe-to-toe with an insurance professional and speak their language and dot the I's and cross the T's the way the insurance company wants them done. Many people can do it themselves. Some people prefer to go the professional route. There's no shame in it. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's a financial decision and a personal decision because a public adjuster is going to take a fee, right? They do not work for free. So typically their fee is going to be anywhere between 7% and say 12% of your benefits. And it can be the benefits that they recover for you, but in some cases they may ask to take a fee on monies that the total claim. And that can be a challenging dynamic. But again, there's nothing wrong with hiring one, but just know that you're going to have to pay their fee, and also once they get involved, typically your insurance company will stop communicating with you and everything will go through that PA. You may be thinking, awesome, or you may think, well, I don't know about that, I want to keep my hands in this thing. So again, those are the decision points, but if you do decide to hire a public adjuster, it's very important that you check their references. It's very important that you know that the fee is negotiable. and that you can execute a contract that says they're only going to get a cut of a certain part of your benefits. Let's say you've already got your contents claim is in good shape, and now you just have the structure part, and you don't want to give them a cut for working on your contents. You're perfectly within your rights to negotiate that contract so that they don't get a fee on your contents portion of your claim. But again, they're business people, so it has to be worth their while. So that's the negotiation. But just know that some of them are working for as low as 7, and some of them are going as high as 15. You're in the driver's seat. They want your business, so you're in the driver's seat, okay? We do have a directory on our website of some public adjusters that support our organization. We very much encourage you only to hire somebody who's a member of a professional organization such as CAPIA, which is the California Association of Public Insurance Adjusters, or NAPIA, which is the national one. So the only reason I'm going into all this about PAs is that I know that at this stage, when people start to get really fatigued and sometimes discouraged, this may be a time you're thinking about hiring one. Plus, we know that a public adjuster was advertising a seminar tonight, and some of you may have seen that. But you got to understand that that's for generating business. That's not to give you free advice. So again, it's your decision, and we're here to help you make it wisely. I want to bring up Carrie Olivier. Carrie is a partial loss survivor out of Colorado Springs, and I met her because her community had organized on their own, specifically because of the problems I was talking about earlier. They felt that a lot of people felt that their insurance adjusters were minimizing the damage, overlooking things, and jeopardizing their health. And there was a lot of frustration. And they organized. They brought in the insurance commissioner's office. They brought in United policyholders. I came out. I met Carrie. I felt for her. She's a smart cookie, big heart. So thank you so much, Carrie, for coming out.
Hi, and welcome to the club that nobody wants to be a member of. I feel for you. I remember, it doesn't seem like that long ago. My fire was in 2012 and was not something we were used to in Colorado. And it's been quite an education since. And I hope that my experience and the experience of the people that have shared their experience with me can be helpful to you. And I guess the first thing I want to communicate to you is hope, because you will get through your restoration of your homes. It's not usually quick and it's not easy, but there is much to be gained through the process if you're open to that. And you have to be patient and persistent. And I applaud you for being here tonight, because I know there's a lot pulling at you. Anyhow, the part of the topic that I'm covering tonight has got to do with really, when can an expert or a contractor help you, and how are you to go about restoring your home to its pre-loss condition? Because after all, the policy you have is an indemnity policy. Its goal, what you've paid for, is to protect you and return you as much as possible to where you were before the fire. When do you generally call on an expert? I mean, this was one of the first questions that I got tonight when I was outside waiting for the event to start. You know, it's been 3 months. It seems like forever. When should I consider hiring a lawyer or a public adjuster? And that is a personal decision. Like Amy said, There are pros and cons, but the decision points seem to come when you feel like things have slowed down and you're not making movement in your claim. Or the adjuster's estimate is not cutting it. Maybe you've finally gotten your insurance company to send an adjuster out and write up a scope of loss or an estimate of what they believe should be paid to you to repair your home, and it's just not jiving with you or with what you're getting from maybe independent contractors or other people that you're seeking out. Or there are whole areas of repairs or a replacement that are not included in what the insurer is offering you. How many people here have gotten at least an estimate or a scope of loss from their insurance company that they claim to be whole, a full scope? So many of you. How many of you agree in general with the scope of that? Okay, and how many of you agree with the amount they're willing to pay for that? Okay. Well, that's not unusual. It takes many passes sometimes. Then there is the issue of the uncertainty of what is damaged. There may be hidden or what's called latent damage. And one of the things that I remember very clearly, and I've seen it replayed in fires since, is you come back and you're so relieved that your home is standing. And you're the lucky one, right? Because your home is standing. And for me, I came back, I got into my home, and it looked pretty good. I mean, I was surprised. It looked good. I still had flowers in my garden. I just couldn't hardly believe it. But then I took my shoes off in my kitchen, and I knew it wasn't right. And there were just layer upon layer of things that were revealed over time that were not very evident. And sometimes it takes a professional eye to really investigate that. Sometimes it takes special tools to investigate that. And hiring an expert or a very specialized contractor can help you do that and have some assurance about what you're dealing with. The other big issue, which I mentioned to the couple of folks who felt they had a pretty good scope, is, you can identify what's wrong, but what is the insurance company willing to pay to fix it, and is it consistent with what's real in the marketplace to get that job done? And whenever there are large events like this, disasters, especially multiple disasters, the prices go up because the demand is higher than the supply. And that should not be your problem, except to the limit of your policy. What it takes to get the job done is what you should expect your policy to cover, as long as it's a covered peril and you're following the guidelines and rules of the policy and doing your due diligence. Maybe the adjusters actually denied coverage or just said no. And what comes in right about now too is this sort of self-doubt. I'd be curious how many people have felt this sort of enter in. Am I being unreasonable to expect to have my carpet replaced and the pad replaced instead of just have it cleaned? Maybe the adjusters or people tell you, that you're kind of being a little hysterical or selfish. There are people that don't have homes at all and you're worried about your carpet. We're here to tell you again, regardless of what's going on with the other souls in your community, this is your home. It's likely the most valuable thing you have owned. You've probably put more investment into that, your home or your property if you're a rental, than anything else in your financial life. So please don't feel bad about wanting to advocate for yourself and trust your intuition, because if something doesn't seem right to you, it probably isn't. And you can seek support and professionals who will have your interest in mind and listen and be on your team. You know, you've maybe worked on your own or had one or two contractors in that either the insurer recommended or they were just readily available. That was who could come out to your house. Maybe one of the top names in restoration contracting. And they came out, and maybe you've had some work done, or you've had partial work done, or you didn't like the contract that they offered, so you haven't had the work done, and things are stalled. You can take charge. In other words, you have only so much time under the policy and in your life to get your home restored and back together. You don't have to wait for the insurer to respond to things necessarily to keep pushing and keep things moving. The insurance, Amy taught me, the insurance policy, the insurance company, the insurance adjusters, sometimes they can be curt. It's easy to get frustrated with them when they're not doing what you expected they would do under a circumstance like this. But they are the vehicle to get you whole in most cases. And so you know, want to take care of your vehicle. So definitely try to work with your insurance company, to work with your adjuster, to help them say yes, to make it easier for them to say yes, because they are often overtaxed in these types of circumstances. And if you give them the documentation that they need from contractors and reliable sources, it makes their job easier to go up the line and ask their superiors to pay the claim. So I just encourage you to avoid the tendency to get oppositional. If you reach a point where you really feel like you're being disrespected by the adjuster, or you're not being heard, or they're just don't know what they're doing, then it is perfectly reasonable to ask for another adjuster. And I would recommend that because it's precious time and they are not all equal. I had, as Amy said, I think I had 14 adjusters. And with my insurance company in the year and a half that it took me to get fully restored, and there were 3 really good ones, and there were 3 really bad ones, and the rest were just kind of not very useful. So, you know, you're not starting over if you have a new adjuster, especially if you're documenting and keeping track of things. So don't be afraid to ask for a new one that you can work with. You know, we can't emphasize enough, whether you're dealing with smoke damage, thermal damage, maybe damage from fire suppression, underlying issues like lead or mold or asbestos in your home that are a result of the fire, or you have a total loss, documentation is everything. It is what gets you heard. The more you can demonstrate in some way that the damage is there and the cost and what is required to really repair it, the more likely you are to get that accommodated by the insurance company. So that's the part where you make it hard for them to say no also. And if you feel like you've done that, so maybe an example would be you've hired a certified industrial hygienist. Maybe you've had Cleaning Pro Incorporated come in and do the insurance-approved remediations, which might include wiping the walls, doing some air purifying, cleaning the carpets, pulling out some of your soft good fabric items and cleaning them. And your home just is still not right, and you know it's not right. You can feel it, and you suspect that it's not healthy, and you've come to an impasse there. That may be the time that you will have to decide whether to hire on your own a certified industrial hygienist or a solid consumer-oriented restoration company who has the connections with those type of experts and can bring them in and test your home properly. And I'll tell you a really quick story about that. Before I was even back in to see my home, I went to my agent of like 28 years and said, I want a certified industrial hygienist to come test the air in my home because I have a son that has asthma and I'm concerned about moving back in. And he said, oh, we don't pay for that. We don't insure the air. We don't pay for that. And it took me months to get them to send, to do that service, to send someone. By then I had learned that at least where I was living at the time in Colorado Springs, there were hardly any industrial hygienists who had any training or knowledge of smoke. They all dealt with maybe mold or lead or asbestos, but there hadn't been large fires in my community and they were not properly trained, so they really kind of didn't know what to do anyway. So they sent someone from California to the tune of $5,000, because I saw the bill, to come to my home, and she would only test 4 spots. And she would not test the spots where I knew it would be found. Now, by then, my home had already been cleaned, but she refused to test the HVAC system. She refused to test, you know, areas that I knew were kind of out of reach of the cleaning where there would still be clearly evidence. And then I learned that the testing that they did, there were 2 types of testing that they did. They did an air test, just, you know, in the ambient air there for carbon. Well, by this time, I want to say mine was 4 or 5 months after the fire. There wasn't any carbon hanging in the air. Carbon is heavier than air, and so there really wasn't much hanging in the air. But, and then they did some tape testing, which they examined under microscope. And I got the test results back, and they were so disappointing and so clearly in the category of you don't find what you don't look for. So we did a lot of beating the bushes, and we found a certified industrial hygienist from Texas that was connected with a lab that had a very good reputation. The lab had served insurance companies as well as homeowners and the FBI and all kinds of forensics. And ultimately, we got entirely different types of testing done. And it turned the tide for several different insurance companies for several partial losses that I personally was aware of and involved in, because that testing was hard to refute. So it's important that if you hire an expert, that you really do your due diligence into whether they are a self-proclaimed expert or truly credible and will provide a service that's worth the money you pay them, and pay attention to the contracts. You don't want to suddenly end up with a lien on your house or on your insurance proceeds that you didn't expect. But again, they can change the story for you. And you can also often get help, good, credible help, from contractors who want your business and who with your encouragement to understand what your goals are, you can determine up front if they're in alignment and they understand you. And if you don't feel like you're aligning, then maybe you don't want to hire that contractor. So it's sort of a balance. You don't want somebody to just come up with results because you want them. Of course, they need to be credible results, but they also need to be looking for what you want them to look for. There's a wide range of people out there with experience and without experience. This is actually a picture of samples that were taken by that certified industrial hygienist field tester that I spoke of. They came in and spent hours and did swabs all over the place and had a special type of testing filter that tested the mattresses and the sofa and the carpeting and, you know, all kinds of things like that. And then they selected the samples that they thought were most relevant, because you pay by the sample usually to get things tested from the lab. And the lab results came back, even after all this remediation, this cleaning that had been done, that my home was still contaminated, and I could feel it. I knew it. I could feel it on every surface. I could feel it in my throat, and this validated that. And ultimately, it made a big difference. It wasn't just as easy as that. It took a couple of levels of pushing back, but this is the kind of evidence you want. There's a chain of custody, so this is a certified individual who can come in and who will be very meticulous about recording what they're doing, where they're doing it, why they're doing it, what kind of report are you going to get, what's it going to look like, and is it going to be useful in the end. In terms of who you would go to for, you know, different issues and some of the common issues that happen with smoke and thermal damage. This was totally surprising to me at the time. I had no idea initially, but not long after the fire, I started having lots of small electronics fail. You know, my sprinkler system controller, the thermostat, my little, you know, wireless router, then my stove, and then my refrigerator didn't sound right. And, you know, what I learned with research was that electronics are very sensitive, and that's why they're, you know, circuit boards are made, your computers and things like that are made in clean rooms. And particulates from smoke can be attracted to these electronics, and over time can be very corrosive. So they may or may not cause that to fail quickly, but they more than likely, if you have significant soot, ash, char, smoke residue inside your home, it doesn't have to be significant visibly, it just has to be significant present. There's a good chance that it's found its way into those electronics, and their lifespan will not be the same. And again, the idea is to hire someone, whether it's an electrician, an electrical mechanical engineer, someone who services appliances for a living, to come and inspect. And when I did that, they were able to show like the coils of your refrigerator. I had a fairly new refrigerator, and the coils were just covered with this fine soot and ash that was in the rest of my house, but even more so there. And ultimately, insurance companies will cover this if there is significant smoke present in your home to cause electronic failure. Fans are very common. It's interesting, sometimes the insurance company will automatically replace, like maybe if you have a radon fan, or you have an air exchanger, you have the little fans, vent fans in your bathroom, they'll include that right away on the scope of loss, because they often fail in these cases. But it's harder to get them to agree to replace the higher priced items. Soft goods, like Amy talked about, I mean, generally most of us don't even worry about the soft goods until we're sure our house is structurally okay. But soft goods are a big deal, and it includes not just your clothing, but big things like your maybe carpet and pad, like we talked about. I mean, if you've had smoke infestation in your home, you just don't want that carpet in there anymore. It's very hard to get get it really clean again. There are different levels of damage, so I'm certainly not telling you what you should do, but it is a valid concern. A couple of things that you don't normally think about are things like painted surfaces. One of the things that we noticed quickly was what started to yellow very quickly after the fire were certain plastics or painted surfaces, maybe more so than others, and especially in areas like coves where maybe the smoke would hang for a while. Your sheetrock drywall is porous, and whatever has been deposited there needs to be removed and encapsulated and then painted again, so at a minimum, so that it is not going to pose an ongoing problem. Another thing that we saw a lot of in the way of things that hold the smoke residue is insulation. And sometimes the insurance adjuster will come up and they might peek in your attic. They don't like to go in the attics. They might peek in your attic and say, it's fine. But the dynamics of a firestorm, the house breathes in under pressure what's going on from the outside. So what we found was a lot of times it would be on the outside of the eaves, kind of on the edge in your attic, where you would find all kinds of burned material has been sucked into the house and it's present there. And that's powerful evidence of what has happened to your home. So all of these things, when you find something like that, it should be clearly documented with pictures and or video. And if you can get your contractor, like the guy that replaced my insulation became an expert at this very quickly, finding, knowing where there was clear evidence of that. And keep in mind that insulation, the value of insulation is the air space that it holds between the fibers. That's what allows it to insulate. It's not the fibers, it's the air. And when it's inundated, it loses its insulation value. Shortcuts don't work very well, and one of the topics that came up that Amy and I were discussing on the way up here is the order in which these things get done in your home, because things end up having to be redone if they're not done in a logical order. So if you have your house cleaned, your carpet cleaned or replaced, and your ducts cleaned or replaced, and then later you replace your insulation, you may well contaminate your home again. So think about that as you go, in terms of when you act to move on the jobs that you're getting done to restore your home. So these soft goods, clothing, things that you can throw in the washing machine or have brought to a dry cleaner or a restoration contractor. Some of them can be cleaned perfectly fine. We found I can't remember it exactly now because I think I've tried to forget it, but some specific type of laundry detergent that was very effective, that we used to wash a lot of things. A lot of my clothes were able to be laundered or dry cleaned effectively, but some of them weren't. Certain materials, certain colors will yellow over time, and it may just be the shoulder that was exposed more, you know, in your closet than the other side, or if you pulled stuff out and moved it to evacuate, it got exposed more that way. Don't be afraid to expect that those things should be replaced if you have determined that cleaning is not going to do the trick. But often, in order for the policy and the insurer to agree to do that, they're going to want to do sort of the least expensive, least invasive thing first. And many times that's a reasonable approach. And it may take a while, but you know, you work with what you have. You drive the vehicle you have. And so I would encourage you to just be aware of those things and work toward a solution that you believe is reasonable. Another area where there's a lot of potential latent damage that can be very costly is in structural areas. The roofing, you guys may have already be aware of some of this. I apologize if this is repetitive, but some of us aren't fully awake yet following an event like this to what's happened. You know, we're very focused on just trying to get our lives in order in a daily way, and so we want to share with you some of this. Tile roofs, for example, may not appear to be damaged by the fire initially because they're fired in the way that they're made, but the underlayment of the roof is really what protects your home. So they call it an ice and heat shield, I think is what it's called, and it is maybe sort of a tar type material that can melt underneath your tile, and if it does, it is not going to do what it's supposed to do in the future, and the tile itself may become much more brittle, just like stucco. Stucco may look and seem impervious to heat. It is not impervious to heat. What we found in our community was that stucco might look pretty good for a while. Maybe some of it's discolored a little bit, but then after a few seasons of temperature changes, you start to really see the cracking and issues with stucco, and so I encourage you to keep that in mind and have someone like a structural engineer or someone who deals with stucco restoration for a living come and give you their opinion. While they're doing that, ask them to take pictures and make notes on the pictures of what they see. There's language used in the trade, splaying, peeling, whatever it may be, that those terms can be useful for you in explaining and advocating for what you need to fix that damage. Gutters, siding. Sometimes it takes getting a different perspective to see the damage. And to document it. It may mean getting up close and getting, you know, maybe a strong flashlight or a magnifier to look for cracks say in the stucco. But sometimes it means the opposite. We had many times insurers, you know, say the gutters are fine, but if you back away and get an angle, a picture, people have drones now, it's kind of easy to get good roof angles and things like that, you might see the warping. And another way that you can sometimes document damage that isn't really apparently visible is through, like Amy mentioned, I think, on windows. Windows are tricky and they're expensive. And there are class action suits sometimes that come out of that, but some of the things you can consider with regard to your windows is that many times the window company itself, let's say your manufacturer was somebody like Anderson or, you know, Geldwin, or I don't know who's out here. Milgard, okay, and that's made in Colorado. But the Milgard, say you have Milgard vinyl windows, or you have fiberglass windows. Those windows are made under a certain heat tolerance. Vinyl has a different heat tolerance than, say, fiberglass does. And if that heat tolerance is exceeded, then your warranty is void on your windows. So if you can reasonably demonstrate to your insurer that the temperatures in and around your house exceeded the 140 degrees or whatever it is for that particular window, and it may be a video of the house next to you burning. It may be the fact that your gas meter melted right below that window. It may be that the window is fogged inside. Sometimes the sash can sag and the window becomes compromised, but you can't look at it and see that it's burned, so the insurer would not want to cover it. So you've got to find another way to demonstrate that your window's compromised. And going to the manufacturer or to someone who installs and knows a lot about windows to help you determine if they're damaged and how to demonstrate that is a great way to go about doing that without necessarily having a lot of cost. You may need to go up and hire someone like a structural engineer who would charge by the hour. But I found you can, you know, maybe get together with your neighbors, and if somebody's got to come from long distance, or if people are busy, maybe you can reach out and find somebody in another community and bring them in and pay them by the hour to come and look at your home. There was one partial loss, thermal damage survivor who was able to demonstrate they needed new windows because their deck right outside the door became warped from the fire, and the tolerance of that deck was much higher than the tolerance of the window. But even though the window didn't literally melt, the tolerance was exceeded, and now the windows were, you know, he was finding ash inside all the time, his windows, and they were drafty. But that was a demonstration and a write-up from that structural engineer that was credible and was useful in him advocating for himself. So, who manages the restoration? This is tiring work, and most of us are not or never intended to be lawyers or general contractors at this particular moment in our lives. But it is your home after all. And whether you hire various special experts to help you document your damage, or you work just directly with the insurance company, or even if you hire a public adjuster or a lawyer, it is still your home. And you are the one who knows your home. You're the one who knows what doesn't seem right or does seem right in your home, and you will have to provide information to them for them to document your claim and to advocate for you. So I just encourage you to do what you need to do to restore yourself and keep at it, and be in command of your claim. And scrutinize everyone who you're going to allow to come in and work on your house, or who you're going to share part of your proceeds with. Make sure they really do have your best interests at heart. They're reliable, they have great references and a history of doing this before successfully. Let's say now you've gotten through the scope of loss process and you have a plan to restore your home. and you know, are wondering, I work full-time, how am I going to manage this project? Your insurance policy should provide something called profit and overhead. If you have more, it's usually the standard is more than 3 trades, 3 or more trades that have to be coordinated. So maybe you have some roof work, you have some paint being done, you have cleaning or carpet being replaced, or maybe a deck being rebuilt. That has to all be coordinated to be done in the right order and to be done efficiently and to make sure your home is safe and secure. On top of those hard items, it usually does not apply to your contents and soft goods, this profit and overhead, only to construction type work. You should be able to hire someone or get paid yourself, potentially, if you're going to act as general contractor, 10% and 10%. In some areas it's more than that because of demand. But oftentimes in partial loss, the insurers will not volunteer this. You have to ask for it. In a total loss, it's almost a given, you know, because somebody's rebuilding the house. So you can ask for that if you have 3 trades-ish going on. And again, be sure that whoever you're relying on to come in your home, even if they're really nice and they say things that you like to hear when they're in your house and they ooh and ah over your pictures of damage, if they are a captive expert, if there's someone who is repeatedly hired by that insurer and they're not willing to share with you their contract with the insurer, why have they been hired? Maybe your insurer says, okay, we'll send a certified industrial hygienist to come to your house and examine it. And you're excited because finally they're going to do that. And you might want to ask them, well, so, or a structural engineer or whoever, you might want to ask them, so can I see your, you know, your invoice, your contract? Oftentimes they're going to say no because they're given a very limited range of what to look for. And we have seen some atrocious things come out of captive experts. Not always, but many times. And it became a pattern in our community that we were on top of, to the point where we would have friends come over and tape the inspections, videotape the inspections, so that we could help, you know, demonstrate what was and wasn't done. And then it doesn't hurt to have your contractor, if you have someone there at the same time, to be a credible witness to what's going on and to maybe point out the damage to that expert that the insurance company sends in. So this is a bit, can be a bit of a chess game. And it's super important to remember that no matter how illogical or challenging it may seem, I mean, something you may think would be difficult may be very easy. The insurance company may say, sure, we'll do that. And then the next thing, not so much. So no matter how frustrated, it's very important to be really clean about what you claim and make sure you follow your responsibilities under the contract so you protect your right legally to be able to use your policy. So because if you think they're not being fair, don't be tempted to kind of be unfair in what you're claiming and to fall into that trap, because you don't need to do that to recover your home. You just need to document what really is and then push hard. And you are in control. Remind yourself of that. Even if it takes a pep talk in the window, in the mirror, I'm in control. Who warrants the work? This is a big deal too. I don't think there are, we were asking around, I don't think there are a lot of preferred contractors. Did any of your insurance companies send a specific restoration contractor? Do you mind me asking who your insurance company is? 3A. AAA, okay. Nationwide. There's still a few, I think USAA does too, that do have preferred contractors, and sometimes that is the best thing, because you're first in line and they get in there and they do at least some of the work and do it well. But generally speaking, even with the preferred contractor, the insurer is not a part of the contract between you and that contractor. You are still responsible to make sure that they complete their job before they get paid. In my mind, it's not good to have the insurance company pay someone working in your home directly, because it then is out of your control. And we found that a very simple method of thirds works really well. You may need to give a contractor a third or a half, depending on the nature of the work, how many materials. Like if it's custom windows, then generally you're going to have to put a lot more money down up front to order those windows. But always hold back, if you can, at least a third of what that contractor is going to be paid until you are satisfied with the job that's done. Make sure that your contractors, it's tempting to just get somebody to do something if they're available and they seem like they know what they're doing, or they have a fair price. Make sure they have liability insurance and workers' comp, that they're bonded before you let them work on your property. It's super important. Don't assume, see it. Get a copy and see it. You can check to see that they have their contractor's license for the type of work they're going to do. We've seen all kinds of fraud that goes on in these circumstances. And don't believe anything unless it's in writing, because unless you have a signed document in writing, if they don't live up to their warranties, it's very hard to get any, satisfaction after the fact. One of the things that we saw happen a lot is, things might start out great in the beginning of the restoration. The company comes in, they've got a ton of people in your house, they have a contract, they have a foreman on the site supervising, and then something else happens or they get busy and you get the dwindles and there's no supervision. So I would encourage you again to be there, to have at least weekly meetings if you have major work going on, and that you have goals and you keep it moving forward. And you have a right to do that, because it's your house, it's your claim, and if you're not satisfied, they should be unhappy. They should want you to be satisfied. We have a lot of resources on the website, questions to ask the contractor before you hire them, and things to get in writing. These are some of them that we just talked about. A great question to ask is, how many jobs are you doing right now? How much time are you allowing for this job? Again, maybe you need to reach outside of this area and see if there's a contractor that needs work that's reliable, that can come in and get it done. Proper handling of your home and site security is a big deal. This was a home that was had a lot of thermal and smoke damage. The picture's kind of hard to see, but you know how I talked about the order in which things are done and how things get the dwindles? So this was a preferred contractor from a large insurance company who came in to save the day, and they fought to get the things they needed done, including getting the wood floors refinished. Because the polyurethane finish on wood is something that is impacted by the corrosive nature of the residues. And new carpet and a bunch of other things done. Well, this contractor got the dwindles, and they didn't have supervisors on the site at the time, and they drug the new carpet along the just finished wooden floors. that were not covered. It's a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but just understand these things happen when there's so much demand and little supply. So it's really important to either be there or get a contractor who's going to be there and mask the things that have already been done in your home to protect them. Another example is this contractor got paid a lot of money to carefully pack out the contents of the home. Well, it turns out that meant putting things, upholstered things that had already been cleaned, in the garage next to the trash can, next to a paint bucket, for example, under a tarp. I mean, just, you know, keep an eye out that things are really being done. There may be items that preferred contractor is getting paid big money for to do in your home that don't get done. You know, the fly's still in the corner of the carpet, but the carpet supposedly was aggressively cleaned. So stay in command so that you know you're getting what your resources are limited, what your resources are paying for. Brand new washer and dryer brought in, and then one of the contractors used it as a ladder and dented the top of the washer and dryer. Now, if that happens, who pays for that? Will the insurance company pay for that? Will the contractor pay for that? Will you pay for that? You might want to know the answer to that question before that contractor is in your house. This is important, and how the dollars flow, you know, just follow the money. Scope of loss or estimate is created by the insurer, but you can help them and you can impact that scope of loss by providing them with numbers from credible sources of what it's really going to cost to get the work done, and advocating to have things added to the scope that you believe need to be done, which may be replacing the carpet instead of cleaning, or in addition to cleaning the carpet. It may be sealing and painting the drywall rather than just wiping it down. We used a rule of thumb to, and UP suggests that if you have multiple people on your check, maybe you have the mortgage company, you have the contractor or your public adjuster or whoever, and yourself on a check, that you have them sign them first and send it to you. So in other words, rather than having everybody sign it and then you send this to the mortgage company, you be in command of that check. Now, you may have to submit that to the mortgage company, but get the other signatures first so that you stay in control and it doesn't get lost in the mail. Everything I did with my mortgage company, I sent registered mail. I really think it's important to get an email communication going with your adjuster and your contractors so that you can easily document your communications. If they say they don't have an email address, I call foul on that. They all have email addresses. So go on the website and look for the general claim email for that company. Call the legal department of that company and say, what is your claim email address? Or fax number if you have to. Email's just so much easier. So we probably sound a bit repetitive here, but these fundamentals are huge in getting the outcome that you desire for your home. And being persistent. And you know, the saying goes, that the devil is in the details. Well, our saying is the dollars are in the details. When you look at a scope of loss, we got together, some of us with the same insurance company, and compared our scope of loss with you know, there might even be the same adjuster or might be a different adjuster, and we knew that our situations were very similar. And it's like, oh, they have all these line items that I don't have. You know, oh, they're replacing all their light fixtures. They didn't replace my light fixtures. Or they are saying they want to do ozone treatment in my house. But, you know, it's controversial. That may not be the best practice. And so your neighbors and the people that are dealing with the same circumstances as you can be a valuable resource. You can be a voice together on issues that you have together with the Division of Insurance. We too were hesitant to make complaints, right? Because we didn't want to anger our adjuster, our insurance company. I'm just here to tell you, that's not the way it works. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and as long as you're polite and you're accurate, you can write a letter of concern or complaint to the Division or Department of Insurance and copy your insurance company at the same time and be clear about what you want, about what your complaint is, and the solution that you want. If you're sending stuff into the claims department and they're not responding, that automatic email you get is on your side because it documents that they're acknowledging that you sent something in. So don't be afraid to be the squeaky wheel. It is often what will get you to that and over that next hurdle. There are materials on the website, and I haven't seen the handouts, but about, you know, dealing with different parts of your home that can be impacted by either thermal damage and or smoke residues. So I encourage you to you know, go when you're next in your standing home, take a new look and do your best to really try to uncover some of these things and satisfy yourself as to whether they're a problem or not, and get them added in as early on in the process as you can so that you're not maybe having to pack things out twice or recontaminating your home to get the work done that needs to be done. There are societies for all of these different kinds of specialties, and you can Google and pick up the phone and find experts. But I love your Facebook page. That is, the fact that you have an open Facebook page allows sharing of information, and that's great, but don't mistake someone appearing there for meaning that they've been vetted because it's open, right? So you still have to do your due diligence. We're still looking for, we're hoping to have a certified industrial hygienist here tonight, but he wasn't able to make it. Hopefully we will have some more resources for you at some point about some that are out here working. And we also have a letter that hasn't been added yet, that if you make sure your name is on the mailing list and then you check, you get, you know, so that you can get emails, perhaps we can get a sample letter to you, or we can show you where you can find it on the website. That is an example of a partial loss complaint to the Division of Insurance and the insurance company, that is a demand letter basically listing what you feel needs to be done. And you'll have to customize that, of course, but it'll give you a good idea. I mean, it just depends. It's all over the place. We found that we could hire engineers to come and just take a look for $100 to $200 an hour, and they can get a lot done in a short period of time. But if you want a fancy report written up, then that's going to be 4 figures usually. Certified industrial hygienists, again, it depends on what you want to have done. Just know before they do the work. You may find that they just want to paint or to restore with stucco one elevation or one wall that was maybe closest to the burn that got discolored or warped or something like that. If you have, let's say, real stucco that is not painted stucco, You don't want paint on one elevation, right? You want new stucco that all matches. And it's reasonable to expect that because that's what it would take to return it to its original condition. So keep that in mind. No is not necessarily no. If you understand your rights under the contract, you can ask for that in the right language and likely get a better result. If you suspect something can't be adequately cleaned and it's going to cost more to clean it than replace it, an example of that would be some bedding, you know, comforters, pillows, things like that. Very often the insurer is happy to replace those rather than to pay to have them cleaned and only then have to replace them still because they didn't come out right. So, you know, hopefully you can get a relationship where you can ask for certain reasonable things and have a better outcome. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.